The galaxy was ablaze with conflict. The Rithar Empire, once a symbol of unity and technological dominance, now fractured by war. Enemies from every corner saw an opportunity to strike, exploiting the internal chaos to carve out their own territories. The Empire's military, spread thin and exhausted, struggled to hold the line. It was in this chaos that a pivotal moment unfolded, one that would shift the course of history in ways no one could have predicted. Princess Saren, then a young heir with little experience of war, was being transported to a diplomatic outpost aboard a royal convoy. The mission was intended to secure a ceasefire with a rogue faction, but the convoy was ambushed in the desolate void of the Kylus Rift. Pirates and mercenaries, emboldened by the Empire's crumbling strength, descended upon the fleet like vultures. Explosions tore through the protective formation of the escort ships, leaving the royal shuttle exposed. Inside the shuttle, panic spread among the crew. The princess's guards, though highly trained, knew they were outmatched. The pirates had superior numbers and firepower, and escape seemed impossible. Saren watched in stunned silence as the people sworn to protect her fought valiantly, their desperation evident. The shuttle's shields began to fail, and the hull groaned under the strain of enemy fire. The situation seemed hopeless, until a single unmarked ship appeared on the edge of the battlefield. Smaller and far less advanced than the pirate vessels, it should have posed no threat. Yet as it darted into the fray, it became clear this was no ordinary pilot. The ship moved with precision, weaving through the chaos with impossible agility. Its weapons, though modest, were aimed with deadly accuracy, targeting weak points in the enemy formation. Within minutes, the tides began to turn. The pirates, caught off guard by the sheer audacity of the lone fighter, faltered. The mysterious pilot disabled key ships, creating enough confusion to break their assault. Then, the unthinkable happened. The human, clad in a battered combat suit, breached the shuttle through an emergency airlock just as the hull was on the verge of collapse. The interior of the shuttle was a scene of chaos, flames licking at the walls, injured guards scattered across the floor, and the princess herself frozen in terror. The human wasted no time. His movements were efficient and purposeful as he approached Saren. "Stay close," he instructed, his voice calm despite the carnage around them. He led her through the crumbling corridors, shielding her with his own body as debris rained down and enemy fire threatened to cut them off. His combat suit bore the scars of countless battles, and every move he made spoke of experience and unwavering resolve. When they finally reached his ship, the airlock sealed behind them just as the royal shuttle exploded in a blinding flash. In the silence that followed, Saren could hardly process what had happened. She stared at the human, her voice trembling as she asked, "Who are you?" He didn't look at her as he replied, his focus on piloting them to safety. "Just someone who doesn't like seeing innocent people die." Before she could press further, the ship docked at a remote outpost. He ensured she was safe, exchanged a few words with the local authorities, and disappeared into the night without waiting for thanks or recognition. For the Empire, his actions became a whispered legend, a nameless human who had saved their future in a single act of defiance. For Saren, it was the beginning of a lifelong question. Who was this man, and what drove him to risk everything for a stranger? Years passed, and the galaxy slowly recovered from the chaos of war, but Princess Saren could not forget the human who had saved her life. His actions were etched into her memory, not just because they had spared her from death, but because they had revealed an unexpected truth. Courage, selflessness, and moral clarity could come from the most unlikely sources. The Rithar Empire owed its survival to his intervention, yet no one seemed to understand the significance of that moment as deeply as Saren. While her advisors and courtiers moved on, burying the memory of the war and its countless sacrifices, she found herself consumed by the mystery of her savior. Who was he? Why had he risked everything for her, a stranger from a species often dismissed by the galaxy's elites? As the years turned her from a sheltered girl into a confident leader, she carried those questions with her. They shaped her vision for the Empire. She wanted to rule not with fear or dominance, but with the same quiet strength and sense of justice the human had shown. Yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that her understanding of him, and perhaps of humanity itself, was incomplete. Her attempts to find him began discreetly. Using her royal resources, she scoured records, interviewed witnesses, and followed leads that all ended in dead ends. The human had left no trace, no registered name, no affiliation, no past. Even the ship he had piloted was unregistered, a ghost in the galaxy's endless void. But whispers began to reach her over time. Stories of a lone human warrior, wandering from system to system, trickled into her court. Some said he had fought off slavers on the edges of Kethri space, freeing hundreds without demanding a reward. Others claimed he had brokered peace between warring tribes on a desert world, only to vanish before the first celebration feast. Wherever conflict raged, tales of his interventions emerged, always marked by the same pattern: a relentless refusal to stand by in the face of injustice and a quiet departure once his work was done. Her advisors urged her to let the matter go. "The galaxy is vast, Your Highness," one said. "You cannot chase a shadow forever. Your duty is here, to your people." But she refused to listen. It wasn't just about gratitude, it was about understanding. The human had shown her what true courage looked like, and she needed to face him again, not as the frightened girl he had rescued, but as the leader she had become. After years of searching, a breakthrough came. A merchant from a neutral trade hub, known for its dangerous and lawless reputation, reported seeing a human fitting the description she had given. The hub was no place for a royal visit. It was rife with smugglers, mercenaries, and black market dealings. Her advisors begged her not to go. "Send emissaries," they argued. "Your life is too valuable to risk." But Saren had made up her mind. Disguising herself as a common traveler, she boarded a small ship and set out for the trade hub. This was no longer just a search, it was a journey of purpose. She didn't merely want to thank the human, she wanted to understand what drove him, to learn from him, and perhaps to find a path forward for her empire. As the hub loomed into view, its jagged silhouette a stark contrast against the stars, Saren's resolve hardened. Somewhere within its labyrinthine corridors and shadowed alleys was the answer she had been searching for. The trade hub was a chaotic sprawl of overlapping structures, dimly lit corridors, and a cacophony of voices speaking countless languages. Saren moved through the crowd with her hood drawn low, her royal demeanor suppressed under the guise of an unremarkable traveler. Her heart raced, but her steps were steady. Years of searching had led her here, and she wouldn't allow doubt to cloud her purpose. The information she had gathered was sparse but promising. A human matching the description of her savior was rumored to frequent a small, unassuming cantina near the outer docks. She entered the establishment, the air thick with smoke and tension, and scanned the room. At first glance, it was no different from any other hub she had visited: alien patrons engrossed in private conversations, suspicious glances exchanged over drinks, and the ever-present undercurrent of unease. But then she saw him. He sat in a shadowed corner, nursing a simple drink, his posture relaxed yet alert. His appearance had changed since the day he saved her. His hair was streaked with gray, and his face bore new scars that hinted at years of hardship. Yet there was no mistaking the calm intensity in his eyes or the quiet confidence in his presence. For a moment, she hesitated. The figure who had become a legend in her mind was now just a man, real, tangible, and flawed. She approached him slowly, her voice steady despite the emotions welling within her. "I've been looking for you," she said, keeping her tone neutral. He glanced up, his expression unreadable, and studied her for a moment before speaking. "Lot of people say that around here," he replied, his voice low and gravelly. "What makes you different?" She lowered her hood, revealing her face. His eyes widened slightly in recognition, though he quickly masked his surprise. "You," he said, leaning back in his seat. "Didn't think I'd ever see you again." "I didn't think I'd get the chance to thank you," she said. "You saved my life." He shrugged, as if dismissing the weight of her words. "Did what anyone would have done." "No," she countered, her voice firm. "You did what no one else would have done. You risked everything for a stranger." "Why?" He paused, considering her question. "Because it was the right thing to do," he said simply. "That's all there is to it." She sat across from him, her curiosity growing. "You've done more than that," she said. "I've heard stories about the people you've helped, the conflicts you've ended. Why do you keep going?" He looked away, his gaze distant. "Because someone has to," he said. "The galaxy's full of people who turn a blind eye, who justify inaction. I can't do that. Maybe it's foolish, but it's who I am." His words struck a chord within her, reaffirming everything she had come to believe about him and humanity. She told him about how his actions had inspired her, how they had shaped her rule and her vision for the Empire. He listened quietly, his expression softening as she spoke. "You've done more for me and my people than you'll ever know," she said. "I came here to tell you that, and to ask if you'd consider standing with us, to help us build something better." He shook his head gently. "I'm not one for thrones or titles," he said. "I don't belong in your world." "Then where do you belong?" she asked. "Out here," he said, gesturing to the cantina and the world beyond. "Helping where I can, in my own way." She nodded, understanding. He was a man bound not by loyalty to a single cause, but by a deep-seated need to make a difference wherever he could. As much as she wanted to bring him into her world, she realized that his strength came from his freedom. "I won't forget what you've done," she said, rising to leave. "Don't," he replied, a faint smile touching his lips. "Just pay it forward." Saren stood at the center of the bustling trade hub, her hood now discarded, revealing her unmistakable royal presence. Conversation ceased, and all eyes turned to her. The tension in the air was palpable as whispers rippled through the crowd. In a place where loyalty was rare, and trust even rarer, the appearance of the Rithar princess was both shocking and dangerous. Yet, she remained undeterred, her voice steady as she addressed the gathering. "I am Princess Saren of the Rithar Empire," she began, her tone commanding yet calm. "Many of you know my title, but few of you know the story behind why I stand here today." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the crowd. "Years ago, during a time of war and despair, my life was saved by a single individual. A human." The mention of humanity stirred a reaction among the onlookers, some surprised, others skeptical. Humans, after all, were often viewed as unpredictable outsiders in galactic society. But Saren continued, her gaze unwavering. "He fought not for glory, nor for reward. He fought because he saw a life in danger and chose to act. He could have walked away, as so many others did. But he didn't. His courage and sacrifice ensured not only my survival but the survival of my empire. And for years I searched for him, not just to thank him, but to understand what drives such a spirit." Her eyes shifted to the corner of the room where the human sat, trying to remain inconspicuous. His expression was unreadable, but there was no mistaking the way the crowd began to follow her gaze, realizing who she was referring to. "He stands among you now," she said, her voice filled with conviction. "A man whose actions changed the course of history. And yet, he asks for nothing. He seeks no recognition, no reward, and no power. He has continued to travel the galaxy, helping those in need, embodying the very principles many of us claim to value but so often fail to uphold." The room was silent, the weight of her words hanging heavily in the air. Saren took a step forward, her voice rising with emotion. "Today, I declare before all of you and the galaxy beyond, humanity is not a species to be dismissed or underestimated. They possess a strength of character, a resilience, and a moral clarity that we can all learn from. This man," she gestured toward him, "is proof of that." The human shifted uncomfortably under the scrutiny, his instinct to avoid attention clashing with the undeniable truth of her words. He opened his mouth to speak, but she continued before he could protest. "To the people of this galaxy, let this be a reminder. Greatness is not defined by titles or empires. It is defined by the choices we make when no one is watching. And today, I choose to honor those choices, not with words alone, but with action. From this day forward, the Rithar Empire recognizes humanity as one of its greatest allies. Together, we will strive for a future where such courage and compassion are not the exception but the norm." Gasps and murmurs broke out among the crowd, the declaration sending shockwaves through the room. For a species often seen as outsiders, this was a monumental shift in perception. Saren's words carried the weight of her authority, and the implications were clear. Humanity's place in the galaxy was no longer in question. The human rose slowly, his gaze meeting hers. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly, his voice carrying a mix of gratitude and discomfort. "I did," she replied firmly. "Because the galaxy needs to see what I've seen. They need to know the kind of difference one person can make." He looked at her for a long moment before nodding. "Then I'll hold you to that." As Saren turned to leave, the crowd parted for her, their expressions a mixture of awe and respect. The human remained behind, blending back into the shadows, but the ripples of her declaration would spread far and wide. The galaxy had witnessed something extraordinary, and it would never be the same again.